Welcome to Unhinged with your host, Theresa Roemer, motivational speaker, fashion expert, and fashion guru.
Welcome to Unhinged with Theresa Roemer, yours truly. And today I have the distinct pleasure of having this amazing group with me, my good friend, Kristi Hoss-Schiller, who is actually the founder of K9s.
Yes.
And is it president now? CEO.
CEO.
You know, I'm just...
JP Davis.
President's a different title.
Okay.
That's
another story.
Yeah.
We also now have the CEO, JP Davis. And also now what title do we have?
Major Gifts Officer and Executive Assistant
Alyssa Blow.
to K9s.org. Yes.
So we have the A-team today. The A-team. And I'm so honored to have been accepted to be a part of the board.
On the board.
Yes.
Voted
Also.
on. Official.
Yeah, we're not letting go of you now.
So I'd like to dive into the story behind K9s because you were the brainchild behind all of this.
It started Christmas of
2010?
2009. I'm at my ranch. I still lived in Houston at the time, but it was 2 days before Christmas, and I was watching our local channel, NBC News, and I see an officer on there, and he's crying, and the volume's down, and I'm making dinner, and my little girl was a toddler at the time, and I'm wondering, why is this man crying? And then I see a picture of a beautiful German Shepherd dog. So I run over to the TV, and I turn it up, and I catch the final end of it, but he said, you know, he was part of our family, and basically I have to go home and tell my children now he'll never be coming home, but he saved my life doing what he was trained to do.
Oh, heartstrings.
I didn't know any part of the story. I didn't know him. I didn't know exactly where it happened, but I was drawn in. So I started trying to figure out the story and what happened and couldn't get to the bottom of it, but I started calling politicians. And I said, did you know that a dog died in Houston? And, you know, they'd say, what department? I said, I think he has a silver badge on and it's a blue uniform. No, it's black and I think it was gold or bronze.
Don't know. Right?
I didn't realize at the time there's 28 different entities of law enforcement just in Houston. Like, so you have ISD, you have Metro, you have constables, you have sheriff, not just Houston police.
Okay.
And I said, look, I just want to give a dog anonymously. I said, that guy looks like he's about my age. He talked about, you know, the dog not coming home. I don't exactly know what happened, but this dog died and it saved his life. And so somebody said, our county judge at the time said, you can't give directly and you decide where the funds go.
Oh.
So if that were the case, everybody giving $100 would say, you know, you can only buy Firestone tires to go on the front left-hand side.
Yeah.
And so they said, if there's some kind of fundraiser later, and I said, but wait, I just have one question. Do my taxes change? Because there's one less officer now. He's going to be on desk duty, they said. He didn't do anything wrong.
Right.
But he doesn't have his partner.
Right.
So do my taxes go down? And they said, well, I said, never mind. I know the answer. They don't. But we have one less layer of protection.
Right.
I want to give this man a dog. Well, the now ex-husband says, hey, I didn't get you anything for Christmas. Just go down to the jewelry, pick yourself out some earrings or something. And I said, I'm not really a big jewelry person. I don't really want any earrings. I want to buy that man a dog. And he said, do you know him? I said, no. I said, but this story, I said, you have to see what I saw. And, you know, he was crying and the dog saved his life. And I could only imagine these little tow-headed children that he probably had. I didn't know how many, but it was thinking Little House on the Prairie. There had to be all of these children and, you know, this beautiful dog wasn't going to come home. And so I ended up speaking to our governor at the time, Rick Perry, and I said, I really want to make sure that I don't know how to go about it. I want whatever this department is to get a dog.
Right.
And it was the Constables Unit Precinct 4. And now when I grew up, I wasn't familiar with constables. They delivered divorce decrees and eviction things. And well, the constable unit here, just precinct 4 is like something like 800 officers. It's huge.
Oh my goodness.
And I remember the governor said, that department has a lot of money. They probably don't need it. And I said, what did you just say? They don't need it. Warren Buffett needs money to be Warren Buffett. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I said, I'm thinking a dog's like $1,000. It's not. But I mean, I truly have
I would think no less than 10,000.
Yeah, I have no idea. And I said, I want to give this anonymously because I think that's how you get picked for jury duty. It's like when you start giving. I really had no clue. So he said, just send the money to my office in Austin and we'll find somebody that needs it more than them.
That's not setting with you at all.
No. And then, so the county judge said, find a charity that gives police dogs, and why don't you just make one in his name?
Right.
I started Googling and looking. There wasn't an organization in the entire United States that did this.
Oh, wow.
And within 48 hours, I had maps up on the wall and I had thumbtacks, the yellow ones meant that they had been 10 years trying to raise money for a dog. The red ones meant, they used to have a department, but the dog had died for whatever reason, each tag.
Right.
And I realized in the small area where I grew up, there wasn't, which is a port town, there was no dog there. And I'm just like, how is this a thing? I thought that we paid our taxes, that they get a purchase order and just go get the things that they need to protect us.
That's how naive we really are.
Really,
Isn't it
really.
like groceries,
I mean, I just thought that that's how it worked.
No,
I
you
promise.
don't think.
You line up 100 people, they thought that that's how it worked too.
Right.
So I said, you know what? I will never forgive myself. Every time I see something like this now on TV, it will haunt me.
Right.
Could a dog have done something there?
Yeah.
Could this department have used one? And of course, then all the things that you never noticed before, it seems like there was 1,000 K9 stories. And so I said, you know what? I have to do this. And at the time I sat on 13 different boards and was passionate about all those things. But, I used to kind of wonder, I sat on the Valley board in Houston and I'm like, they don't raise all those millions to feed those girls. Like they split a head of lettuce 6 ways every 6 weeks.
Right.
I mean,
yeah.
What does that go to? And then, one of the wealthier, famous, established family, if they have somebody that dies, that's built in for generations.
Yeah.
The ones that you see on the side of buildings
Right.
and things like that they give to the arts. And again, I think the arts are very important. But don't you want to protect the people that protect us?
Right.
And I didn't have any law enforcement background.
Right.
And I just said, I have to do this. And so I got together with lawyers and CPAs. And so I want to make sure everything's done correctly.
Right.
And so it took me, a few months to get the 501 and the national thing.
Yeah.
And then we started. And I said, somebody said, what's the goal? About 6 months in. And I said, maybe one day we'll be able to give one as far as Austin. Well, I think within 6 weeks, we were in Dubuque, Iowa, and now we're in like 40 states and 2 other countries, and we've given close to 400 dogs, and we've removed over $8 billion in contraband, and we protect close to 3 million kids a day in school against active shooters.
Right. Wow. What a vision.
Yeah.
What a vision. And it all started because you saw something on TV.
Well, you just couldn't deny that.
And there's a lot of people that be like, oh, it was just a dog.
Well, and but seeing somebody that
was that guy's partner.
Right, but that was willing to put their life on the line.
Right.
And then you start hearing the stories from different places. In other words, we gave a dog in Canton, Ohio, and the dog, it was in a dark building, and that dog knew that there was somebody in there.
Right.
The officer didn't.
Right.
That dog jumped in front of him and took the bullet for that officer.
Wow.
And when you see at the football, what is it called in Canton? The football where they held the Hall of Fame. That was where that dog's funeral was.
Oh.
People came, officers came from all over the world.
Yeah.
Canada, Mexico, It was completely full. There must have been 2,000 people in there laying that dog to rest. They had no idea how they were going to replace that dog.
Right.
And so we were there.
Yeah.
We never say we want to replace. We
Right.
supplement.
Right. So how do we suddenly bring in these two people? Like, how did they come into your world?
Well, when
Great question.
I was,
If
praying-
anybody watched the last episode,
the last episode, when I had strokes, I was in the hospital and they were trying to convince me after they figured out I had the stroke on the
Right.
brainstem.
Right.
They said, we have to take you in for a spinal tap. And I said, absolutely not, because I'm on this thinner. And they told me not to. And they
Yeah.
said, no, it's fine. And I said, my neurologist wasn't there. And I said, not until I'll fight you.
Yeah.
I said, no,
Yeah.
I can't do this because I'm on this drug. And my ex-husband and Chief Acevedo was in the room.
Yeah.
And they were like, don't be scared. It's just a spinal tap. I've already had 5 this month. And I couldn't really talk. And I'm trying to ignore them telling me they're going to prep me to go down. And I'm like, it's not happening. And I'm looking through my doom scrolling. And I'm looking through my Instagram, and she sends me a note in my Instagram, and she sees that I've had a stroke. Doesn't know me. She lives in
I was
San
gonna say,
Francisco.
Yeah.
And so she'd been following me for maybe a year?
probably about 6 months.
And she wanted to start her own charity. And she said, I think I should be following people.
I was getting ready to I wanted to open a nonprofit to rescue dog meat dogs from Korea. But you couldn't do the live import of animals during COVID. And it was going to be, delayed by at least probably a year to 18 months. And so I thought this is a really good research opportunity. Find people who've had dog nonprofits that have been super successful. And so I had been following Kristi for about 6 months and learning and researching, but it really touched me what she was doing specifically with K9s for kids, which places the dogs in schools to, protect against active shooters, detect drugs, narcotics on school premises, and
Right.
also alleviate some emotional distress that students face, because my dad was actually a large drug trafficker while I was growing up. And I had been dropped off at one point in Texas with members of the cartel who didn't speak English, and I was only 6. And so I knew kind of on the back end.
One of the largest drug dealers, we should note, not just a drug dealer.
Yeah. He dropped me off, and I didn't know if he was coming back. And so, really,
Did you speak Spanish?
No.
She could want a farm in Iowa.
but when I learned about Kristi's foundation, it kind of jogged that memory for me. It was one that I had kind of displaced for a long time, and I knew what I saw back home. And since then, we've had multiple encounters actually with officers who've heard of him or
The cocaine who?
acquaintance.
What was the guy in Iowa?
It's
Cocaine.
meth
in
man.
prison. Meth man.
Yeah, there's a lot of stories there.
She was like, oh, I know him. I grew up with him. We were locked in a closet once with his kids.
Yeah. So at any rate, it jogged my memory. And so I was really inspired by what she was doing. And so I was walking into a Nordstrom rack. She had posted about her stroke, and I just started bawling. I didn't know anything about this woman. I knew nothing, but I was like devastated by the fact that she was what I deemed as deathly ill. And so I was like, well, I don't have anything to lose. So I sent her a message. She was in the situation that she was in. So my message at that point was like this beacon of hope that there's somebody out there, there's somebody that cares. Mm-hmm. And from that moment forward, we kind of just struck up a conversation that continued every day because she couldn't speak. And so her only form of communication was writing. And so we just kind of became each other's best friend via Instagram DMs.
Right.
So fast forward about 3 or 4 months, COVID it was not going anywhere, and she couldn't get help from A&M. And so she said, hey, I have a great idea. Remind me to tell you before I forget. I was like, how
But my
long should I
short-term memory,
wait?
it would forget in
Right.
15 minutes.
And so I remember a couple days later, I was like, do you remember the great idea you had? And she goes, would you consider moving to Texas and help me with my foundation? And I remember exactly where I was standing at the moment. And I thought, what do I have to lose? Right? Like, what am I afraid of by saying yes?
Right.
And she's like, look, I've got cabins on my property. You can stay in a cabin, bring your animals. Like, you're welcome. She goes, I just need help. And so I said, well, give me a minute. I have to figure out some things. Moved home to Iowa for the holidays and then showed up on her property December 28th, 2021. And fast forward to how we got JP involved. We spent probably the first year that I lived on the property really dialing in on Kristi's health because I had done a lot of functional medicine research in the course of my life because I had gone without health insurance for a long time. So I tried to be aware of new methods of wellness. And so we spent about a year getting her well. And then diving into K9s and learning the back end of what it means to run a nonprofit, Kristi's done an amazing job running a nonprofit without having never run one before. But I had the luxury of having known JP from the time I lived in Louisville for 4 years, and he's the best fundraiser I've ever known in my life. And so back up about 18 months ago, I called him one day in tears and just basically, actually fast back a little bit, Kristi and I had a podcast, and he had seen a clip of our podcast, and he said, "Hey, what are you doing? I'd love to maybe be a guest on that and talk about some of my experiences, coming out."
Yeah, such a nerd. I was like, I want to be on your podcast.
So he didn't know anything about Kristi, didn't know where I had been for the last couple of years. We caught up. I think he fell in love with Kristi immediately on that podcast and got curious. And so it opened the door for me to then call and be like, "Hey, what are you doing with your career right now? I'm at a disadvantage because I don't know how to help propel what she's created in a forward trajectory that it deserves,
Right.
and make it bigger."
Right.
And so he said, "I'll let you tell him what you said."
So he's got a huge background in
Yes.
fundraising.
It's my whole background.
Right.
I fell into it. I mean, who knew that you could be, have a career in fundraising? No one talks to you as a kid.
Right.
You could be a fundraiser or
Right.
work in nonprofits, and go figure, it's tens of thousands of jobs.
Right.
But I've just been a big-hearted Appalachian my whole life, and sort of my own version of an activist. And so I've always jumped into things that I care about, and fast forward, now I'm older and a professional, seasoned fundraiser. But, Kristi had built a foundation mostly with her own generosity, her own big heart, her own funds. She raised money from her friends, people who loved her, family. But it was a private foundation for the most part and I'll tell you that because I came in and I was like, "You are spending so much of your own money, you don't have to spend."
Don't
She
we
was
all
just
do
like,
that?
"Oh, you get a dog." It's like Oprah and Cars.
I
It's
do
like,
that.
"You get a dog and you get a dog and don't worry about it,
say
for free."
no to anybody.
Yeah. And I'm like, okay. So I said, well, she wanted to start a community-wide, nationwide, scalable nonprofit. And I was like, well, and I said to her when she called, I was like, look, I just started a consulting firm. I was having the time of my life. I didn't want to go back to work for the institution. I had like 8 clients and I'm an entrepreneur. I was like, I don't I was like, does she have founder syndrome? I can't deal with that. And
I didn't know what founder syndrome was.
and I
Thank
said,
God he had owed me a long,
yeah,
long
that's true.
favor.
Well, that's a story we should tell in a second, and I'm willing to tell it if you want. Okay. So I said, well, if you fly me to Texas and let me meet Kristi, let's really know that this is the right thing.
Let's see if we have some synergy.
Right.
He dated us for about 9 months.
Yeah,
before he
I did. We dated, all right. And because I need to make sure this was marriage,
Yeah.
And because I know what I'm doing, and I've been there, done that. I just don't want to make the same mistakes.
Right.
And I have met with founders that, whew,
Yeah.
Lord have mercy. But Kristi also sold me her vision. The history of the organization was inspiring. What she had done with her own money was inspiring. And I think, we've had this conversation with the work that you do with your philanthropy. And I think building a scalable nonprofit, there's a whole science to it that not everybody knows unless you've worked with somebody
Right.
like me or other consultants.
Because we're so good at spending our own money.
Right, 100%. And I'm like, oh, help me help you. But Kristi had inspired me with her. I knew that she had been sick with strokes. That was inspiring. The fact that she wanted to come out of her former marriage and really focus on something that meant something for the community was inspiring. And I'll tell you, even a year ago compared to today, there's a big difference in Kristi's health.
Right.
So fast forward, I came, obviously hard to say no to this woman, but also more than that, I realized it's a whole space that I didn't really know, and that excited me to be able to come in and learn the whole canine world, law
Right.
enforcement world.
Right.
And it's been a lot of fun. We've met a lot of people, but it is like building a startup.
Yeah.
It's taking risks. And so along the way, fast forward, we've been able, the last year, we've succeeded in building a board. Kristi has succeeded in building capacity in a quick way where we've been able to build a team. We just literally hired our chief of brand development as of this week. And we've got key strategic sites that we made splashes in, including, I tell the story, Kentucky. We had a dog, we had a dog in Kentucky in Owensboro, and Astor, who was retiring. And when I called that handler and told him as a Kentuckian that I'm going to be taking the helm as CEO of this national nonprofit in Texas, he says, I got to tell you something. We applied for that grant. And he goes, we almost didn't. And he said, we were just shocked when we got the phone call that this lady in Texas cared about us in Kentucky. And fast forward, that dog retired, and come next month, we're supplementing that dog in the same town, so they'll have a dog as well in Kentucky. And so that's a story that we hear throughout the states when we go. And we have 250 applications waiting for dogs.
Right.
And we're really creating a sophisticated model of, Kristi said think big, so we're thinking big. And when you have high net worth individuals, celebrities, oil, for example, tycoons or business tycoons who require that extra layer of security at home, that we call that a fee for service. If you want to write a 501c3 donation check, we'll get you a dog that's highly trained to protect you at home.
Right.
And that's a tax write-off.
Yeah.
So why work with us? Because when you write that big check, you're not only getting an amazing dog, you're also helping us place dogs in communities that can't afford it.
Right.
Well, and to touch on one of the things that you said, it's like the education that you got as soon as you stepped into this. There's so many things you start to learn about this arena of safety and public safety that you would have never realized otherwise. But one of the big pulls for me, and I know for you as well, is I didn't realize that all of the working dogs in the United States come from other countries, and it supplements our government. And the government spends an obscene amount of money every year acquiring these dogs from other countries. But we're in a precarious situation with national security where what are we going to do if all of a sudden we're handicapped with our ability to acquire these dogs? And so we've acquired a property. We're putting the motions in place to not only have our own breeding and training facility, which will be state of the art, because I promise the listeners don't want to know what happens to dogs that don't make the cut in these other countries. But we want to revolutionize that industry and also implement a rescue capacity that is long past overdue in this arena. And I think being innovative in our decisions and our thoughts and how much you've actively, got corporations involved is like we're really trying to set the precedence for the canine industry in America that should have been done 25 years ago.
So, quick question though. So, when we get one of these dogs and they get trained, are they born in the United States, or do we have to get them from Europe no matter what?
And the cost with tariffs,
And
now
get 'em over
every
here.
vendor who
So
supplies.
all of these dogs come from different
And
countries.
the country-
None of them are born in the United States. And we've got to get them here.
Very few.
We've got to train them.
And the tariffs, in the last year, every single vendor who goes to Europe and has those relationships, their cost of goods and business now are 15-20% higher.
But my
this
question
year.
is why isn't the United States not breeding these amazing dogs?
We can figure
That's
that
an
out.
excellent
Why can't
question.
DC?
No, I mean,
Theresa?
so they're saying, we need to get our own oil so we don't have to depend
Right.
on Russia.
It's the
we don't
same
have to.
thing with-
So why can't the United States breed these amazing dogs?
We're
And-
working on that. We just launched an advocacy sort of public funding agenda where we could start building coalitions, because I do think it's going to require a coalition of all of us in this field, because the United States, it's not really been a regulatory field.
Right.
And I think there's some complicated layers to this, but I think if we can come at it as a coalition, we know we could save, for example, the federal government hundreds of millions of dollars just by working with organizations like us and how we do it.
Right.
And we also know that science and medicine research is showing that these dogs are doing far more than we've ever imagined.
Right.
Like detecting disease, for example,
Yeah.
most recently in Kerrville, but also Kentucky and North Carolina. Flooding, tornadoes, like increase of weather patterns is creating opportunities for search and rescue. And so we're actually funding a live research training pilot program for search and rescue dogs as we speak, and for rapid response dogs, which we're calling in potential shooting situations.
Right.
Yeah, well,
Oh,
to
there
touch
you
on
go.
your point about search and rescue, because departments don't have the capacity that they need for these dogs or the supplemental income for these dogs, and we're providing those grants, a lot of departments, they're going to ask for narcotics dog apprehension dogs or explosive dogs. They're not asking for search and rescue dogs, because how often do they need to utilize search and rescue or a cadaver dog? So
Right.
when Kerrville happened and all of a sudden you've got bodies of all kinds of children, there are search and rescue cadaver teams, but they're individual units of people who've just trained these dogs. They're not actually tied to law enforcement. So they were all sent out by FEMA because they weren't correlated to law enforcement. So we got a call like in the 12th hour from Navy SEALs saying, we're desperate for these search and rescue dogs. We took Kristi's personal protection dog and she scored perfect on her KMPV test, which is basically like perfect SAT for a dog. And she did find a submerged 350 at Camp Mystic.
F-350.
And it just goes to show that our communities, our as a whole, our nation, they don't have the supplement. So we want to have our entire own search and rescue division where we have boots on the ground ready to deploy at any opportunity to be, a facility or vehicle for
Right,
safety.
right.
Like, how many lives could be saved that way?
Right.
There's so many like German Shepherd rescues. After somebody usually sees one of these shows like a John Wick where there's a Belgian Malinois in there, but he says, "Oh, I want a dog like that."
Yeah.
And you go, "No, you don't," because it's like living, with
Yeah.
a
They call them alligators for a reason.
alligators,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
They're very high strung and they need constant reassurance, let's just say. And so those end up in shelters. And a lot of these are very valuable dogs.
Right.
Why can't we use some of those dogs
Right.
and repurpose them?
Right.
It makes perfect sense.
Right.
And so I think with K9s for Cops, over 16 years having the impact that it has, with K9s.org, how we've evolved and where we're headed, we're not just K9s for Cops anymore, even though that'll be our dominant flagship. We're also K9s for Care, K9s for Kids, K9s for Veterans, K9s for people with disabilities, people, the aging adult that, and so I think our future, what we're most excited about is opening up the window for the impact that these dogs can have beyond what we've realized so far. And that's the cool part about where we are. And what I tell people, we just launched the $9 campaign, which is recurring every month. Just pledge $9 every month for us. And people are like, what's that going to do? A lot.
Yeah. Skip the Starbucks
Yeah.
one day.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah.
We're
And
just,
people think we don't want your money if you can't write a $10,000, $25,000, $1 million check.
No.
We want those checks, by the
This
way.
was a
We want
grassroots
them.
effort. So it only makes sense that we reach out through a grassroots
Right.
effort.
Of course.
And
of
what's
course.
honestly been one of the most inspiring things, but I've seen the circles that Kristi has socialized within, right? And I've seen the kinds of people. The people who are most excited about giving are the wives of the officers, the teachers who know that there's a dog in their school. The people who honestly can't afford to give to us are who give the most. And so
Right.
doing a $9 a month reoccurring donation,
Right.
We get 15,000 of those. We have every need we have met and then some. And so
Right.
all it takes is asking one more person every day, hey, do you mind signing up for a $9 a month reoccurring gift?
Right.
In my world of LGBT, whether it's Pride or something, if there's a very public event, it makes me feel like whether it's Pride and they're sweeping the streets to make sure there's no bombs. I mean, that makes me feel safer.
Yeah.
Well, and one of the other things to mention too, because a lot of people, I hear what you say sometimes where people get angry that you're supporting the police or whatever, but it's like so far beyond that. Like,
Which I'll never understand.
if you're not anti-drugs or you're not anti, shooters in schools or whatever, like maybe you're anti-sex trafficking. And so one of the things that we talk about all the time is if we're disrupting the drug trade, we're disrupting that trade as well.
Right.
And, sometimes we have officers all the time who have speculation of people trafficking drugs. But one of the greatest examples that Kristi uses a lot is one of her officers who's been a handler. He's, I think, on his third dog right now because he's amazing at it. He pulled over a car. If he hadn't had that dog that day, he wouldn't have had probable cause to take $130 million worth of raw liquid fentanyl off of the streets, which could have killed 3 times the state of Texas population in one bust. That was
Wow.
one bust.
Wow.
That dog proved its worth that day alone.
Wow.
Not to mention the other 8 years it had its
Because
career.
the guy alone would have never detected it.
Well,
Right.
he wouldn't have
We
detected it,
couldn't
but
have.
even
No.
if he'd had suspicion, he wouldn't have had probable cause to
Right.
seize
Like
it.
a police officer in a lobby of any location who has a dog that's trained to smell, and you have to tell this statistic. It's one thing that police officer is not going to know that somebody walking close by is equipped. And
A
what's
dog's
it worth?
nose is 300 to 500,000 times stronger than a human.
And so if you're a bank and you've got philanthropic dollars, $50,000 gift, which I know that's a gala that people give money to.
Right.
$50,000 gets you a highly skilled dog to provide an extra layer of security. We even argue, like, what if we go to insurance companies and argue, hey, maybe that's a subsidy that because you provided that extra layer of security, because that dog is trained to go off if
Yeah.
there's gunpowder.
Yeah. Wow. Wow.
So we're trying to
Yeah.
save the world just 4 paws at a time.
Right.
Or $9 a month at a time.
$9 a month.
$9 a
I
month.
always say in a world of thoughts and prayers, which I support that. But I oftentimes have felt helpless when there's a shooting or, in this world of, this is something. It's something to get your hands on. So
Yeah.
if you're home and it's like another shooting or another, and you're like, you feel helpless, so there's nothing you can do.
Right.
Support us.
Right.
Because we're out trying to do something. It's not the solution.
Right.
But it's a solution.
And
Right.
it's also not Republican and it's not Democratic.
It's bipartisan.
It's-
And if it is, that's your problem.
Yeah.
It should not be.
Right. Right. So where can everybody find you?
At K9s, capital K, number 9s.org. And there's a place on there for, donations. And again, the $9, K9 a month.
Right.
Think about it. We probably, between a Starbucks run and just fishing change out of your car, that's
Right.
$9 a month.
Yeah, easily. So that's the website.
Yes.
You're also on Instagram and Facebook?
Yes. And
K9s for Cops on Instagram. We're having trouble changing
Yeah.
it because once you get your name assigned, it's difficult to move that. So
Right.
it's K9s for Cops on Instagram as well as Facebook.
you can follow all of our other endeavors, K9s for Kids and K9s for Care.
You can see a lot of great clips of the history and the years on K9s for Cops YouTube as well. And Kristi was on the Steve Harvey show, and as this impact is long lived, but we want to make it a legacy that lives past Kristi.
But we've had 2, maybe 3 dogs each take over $1 billion off the street by themselves.
Right.
What other rate of return?
Right.
When I
Exactly.
had
Exactly.
someone say to me, I don't really like you are drugs. Like I don't care about the drugs. I'm like, do you care about sex trafficking? I was like, because we can't prove it, but we're disrupting the sex trafficking route.
We can't prove it.
Oh, yeah.
We can't prove it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we can prove it. We just
Yeah.
don't want to show it right now.
Yeah.
'cause it's-
Yeah, definitely. Well, you guys have been listening to Unhinged with Theresa Roemer. I hope you've enjoyed today's segment. This is near and dear to my heart and everyone else's hearts sitting here with us today.
And thank you so much for supporting us.
Yes,
Thank
so
you.
much. So until next time, bye-bye.